Hey, what is going on, guys? This is SMEB Reviews, and it's time to take a look at the debut album from Gretta Van Fleet, From the Fires. Let's get to it. This is Gretta Van Fleet's first studio album. They did release an EP earlier this year, Black Smoke Rising, with 4 of the tracks that are on this album. This album consists of 8 tracks. It's just barely long enough to even call it an album. It's almost an EP, but it is long enough to be considered an album. It consists of, like I said, those 4 songs that were on the EP, 2 covers, and then 2 originals by the band that were not previously released. And honestly, this album is extremely, extremely good. If you know anything about the band, they had a pretty decent hit with Highway Tune earlier on the rock charts, and it's actually done pretty well. And this band, if you've heard their music, you would know that they sound distinctly like Led Zeppelin, which is a very hard comparison to make. I mean, Led Zeppelin is a extremely big name in rock music and extremely revolutionary, and when listening to this, they sound like Led Zeppelin. The lead singer, Josh, he has a crazy range. He can hit really high notes and those like primal screams that Robert Plant would hit in Led Zeppelin, and he just has that delivery and that charisma that Robert Plant would have. And that's not to say that the rest of the band doesn't sound like it. The music style sounds like that 70s rock that we know from Led Zeppelin. And all of the band members, while I would not probably say that they are as good as each of the like instrumentalists of Led Zeppelin, or even, I mean, Josh, while an amazing singer, I would not probably say is quite as good as Robert Plant. They are all still amazing at their instrument and extremely powerful in their delivery. And they actually have proficiency. It's not just chords that they're playing. There is good riffs, good bass line, good drum work, and amazing vocals. It's actually very impressive for a band who has very little recognition, and at this point has only released 8 songs, 2 of which are covers. As I said, the band definitely has that bluesy rock sound that we know from Led Zeppelin, and every element of the band, like I said, from drums to vocal, all sounds extremely like Led Zeppelin in style. And yes, it's a very hard comparison to make. I think that often bands get compared to bands that came before them, but they are not necessarily anywhere as near as good as those bands they're being compared to. But honestly, Gretta Van Fleet really sounds good. They have a lot of those distinct qualities that made Led Zeppelin good in their music. And honestly, they are not as good as Led Zeppelin, but they definitely are holding up that torch and really are carrying on that flame. And no, I would not say that they're just a ripoff of Led Zeppelin. Honestly, all these songs sound rather fresh. They all have just a little bit of new influences to make them still sound new and fresh. And some of the music, I mean, the riffs are very distinct. Nothing really just sounds like a B-side Led Zeppelin song. It sounds like their music, and they've defined themselves as an artist, but the artist they define themselves as is one that sounds extremely like Led Zeppelin. And honestly, that is completely a compliment. As I said, the lead singer has this crazy range. He can do so much with his voice, and listening to it, yes, I can hear the distinctions between Robert Plant and him, but they are very similar, extremely similar. Listening to both of them, on a listen from without paying a lot of attention, it could be easy to mistake the lead singer for Robert Plant. And that's crazy because Robert Plant is such a talented vocalist. He is definitely one of the best vocalists of all time because he just has that indistinguishable power and charisma in his voice, and he can just belt out different notes. And the lead singer Josh can 100% do that. He does it extremely well. It's extremely impressive, honestly. The one area where this band probably does not quite match Led Zeppelin is in the lyric department. Not to say that they're bad. Honestly, a lot of the songwriting is even similar to Led Zeppelin in the lyrical standpoint, just because it's very poetic is the best way to say it. Every line is kind of they're very vague in their lyrics and do not necessarily define what they're meaning in each of their songs, and that's kind of what Led Zeppelin was. I mean, Stairway to Heaven in general is a pretty vague song and does not tell the full story. There's some look that has to be given to that song as well as their other songs, And that, even from a lyrical standpoint, I would say that Gretta Van Fleet is very similar. No, I do not think that they're as good or as deep in their lyrics, but for a first album, these are some pretty decent lyrics, and none of these are just bad or awful. At worst, they're passable, and no lyrics ever stand out. Honestly, I commend the band just for having some decent lyrics and not just falling into that pop trend of just bland generic lyrics. It's pretty impressive, and honestly, as a whole, this album is spectacular. And even looking at the songwriting credits, every one of these songs was written by the band, obviously, except for the covers. They were penned by the band, and that's something that I really enjoy seeing, just because oftentimes there's so many co-writers that kind of just bog down the music and take away from the actual experience of the band, and I think that it's really good to see that this band was all writing their music themselves. Now, unfortunately, another downside that I have to say is that the production seems just a kind of muddled. Sometimes the vocals are kind of hidden behind the music, and it all becomes very meshed together, and it's not that you can't hear them individually, it's just that sometimes it's just a little too quiet to really make out to have the effect that it was wanting to have. And that's really one of the very few complaints, besides the lyrics, like I said, it's one of the very few complaints that I have with this album. It just sounds a little distant at some points, especially in the lyrics. I hear it a couple times in the lyrics, just that the words could be a little louder, and that would make it a little bit better. But above all, it's honestly not even that bad. They're a smaller band who does not have the budget for these huge name producers, so you can't really dock them too much for that. It is still a point, but a small point. And both of the covers, honestly, are very distinct. I mean, they definitely made them their own. A Change Is Gonna Come is a cover of Sam Cooke's song, and it's honestly much different from the original, and I really enjoy just hearing the difference in that song. Meet on the Ledge is the other one by Fairport Convention, and both of these songs definitely really took the song and made it their own, and that's something I enjoy in covers. I hate when covers are just the same thing rehashed with a different singer. They made them their own and made them distinct instead of just following what the song already was. Above all, this was a really solid album, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. I do not have very many complaints at all. It's not the best, and I think that the band can definitely grow, and I think that's just because this is a first project besides the EP that they had previously released. And once they get some more songs down, I honestly think that they'll be even better. I think it's just the first album, they kind of took a hit just from being newer to having all these songs. But yeah, above all, I'm going to give this an 8.5 out of 10. But thank you guys so much for watching. It really means a lot. Please leave any comments down in the description of albums that you want me to check out or review, or any comments that you have for me. Thank you guys so much for watching. It really means a lot. And I'll see you guys later.